Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to give everybody a couple of minutes to join the call, and then we will get started. So thank you for coming along. I'm just going to keep an eye on the everyone coming in. And thanks so just admitting people as they join. I don't know if anyone's got the chat open, but please do pop in the chat who you are, sort of where you're from. We would love to check that everyone's there, know who we've got on the call. So pop your details in the chat. We would really appreciate that. Thanks so much, those of you who are saying hello. Lovely to welcome you. Nice to see you, Angie. We've got a few care associations, a few care providers. So that's brilliant. Hi, Nada. Lovely to see you all. We'll just give it another minute or two, let a final couple of people join, and then we will get going. To those of you who've just come on the call, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please do pop your name and where you're from in the chat. We'd love to know who we've got on the call, and we will be getting going in just a mo. Okay, numbers look like they've stabilized a bit. So whilst we're letting the final couple of people join, I will get going with welcome and introductions. So thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar hosted by us at Digital Care Hub, but actually delivered by our lovely colleagues over at NHSE. And we're going to spend today looking at identifying critical suppliers and how they are a key to your business continuity. So thank you for joining us. Before we get cracking, just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. I know it sometimes catches people out being on lovely Zoom. So today's workshop is going to be recorded. So please bear that in mind with anything that you share on the call, and it will be circulated after the session. Unlike some of our webinars, today is an interactive workshop, so you can be seen and you can choose to speak. Absolutely no problem if you're tucking into a sandwich at the same time. We know that lunchtime is very precious. Please feel free to do that. But remember, we can see you. And please do interact with us during the session. We want this to be interactive, workshop style. Please don't feel you have to sit there in silence. Join in, put your hand up and engage in the conversation, because it really enables us to get value from what we're talking about today. As I said, for any of you who haven't already done so, if you could please put your name and organisation in the chat. That just helps us know who's on the call, both ourselves and your fellow delegates. If you're not familiar with Zoom, please do make sure that you turn your microphone off unless you're speaking. It just helps to prevent background noise. And if you'd like to speak, please do. But if you could raise your hand, use the raise hand function, that would be really, really helpful. I was actually just about to tell you how to do that, but I have a slightly different view and I'm now not sure how you do it, but hopefully you can all work it out. You can also use the chat function, so please feel free to pop things in the chat if you don't want to speak verbally or it's not appropriate to do so. If you've got questions, again, either raise your hand or put them in the chat. We'll try and keep an eye on that as we go through. We will intervene with the speakers at an appropriate moment or pick them all up at the end. Any that we haven't managed to complete or answer, we'll make sure we send out written responses to your questions with our follow-up information at the end. As I said, you'll get access to the recording and the presentation slides and any other relevant information at the end. So that is that. So just quickly, who are we? For anyone who hasn't come across Digital Care Hub, hopefully you'll have. We are a not-for-profit organisation, and we are there to support social care organisations to use digital technology. And we do this by providing free guidance, resources and tools on data protection, cybersecurity and digital transformation. If you haven't come across us, please do take a look at our website. We've got absolutely loads out there to help you, and everything is free. So even better. It's not often you hear those words. But I'm now going to pass over to our lovely colleagues from NHSE to look at identifying critical suppliers and how that is the key to business continuity in social care. So Glenn is Senior Programme Manager from the Cyber Improvement Programme for NHSE. I hope I've got your title fully correct there, Glenn. And I'm now going to pass over to Glenn.
That's great. Thanks, Fiona. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Yeah, senior program manager is good. I normally refer to myself as the delivery lead for the identification of criticality for the cyber improvement program. Do you want to just go to the next slide, Fiona, and we'll just run through the agenda quickly. So we're quite a small team, but there's a number of us here today, and we'll all introduce ourselves as we go, rather than go around the team to begin with. I'm going to hand over in a moment to Catherine, who's going to run through essentially a bit of background. So why cyber is important. Catherine's our clinical lead, and what that really means to the health and social care community, particularly adult social care, as that's the group that we're speaking to today. Then hand back to myself, Liam and Holly, where we'll run through really what we want to do with the session today. So essentially where the identification of critical suppliers fits in within the cyber improvement program, why it's important to understand what our suppliers look like. If we refer to supply chain, we mean that from the perspective of all the suppliers within our system, not the NHS supply chain for which you might be utilised to order goods from. So that's what we mean, but we'll try and refer to it just as suppliers, but sometimes that causes a little bit of confusion. Hopefully that will take about 25 minutes. We'll then move into the interactive session. And as Fiona says, this is really important to us. What we've been doing for the last few months is running a number of workshops across the system, across different types of organisations in health and social care. This is an opportunity to speak to. I'm going to run a kind of a combined workshop here, suppliers, and we'll give you a bit of help to get there, where we'll then collect some information about them, show you how we're going to score them against criticality, and that hopefully will take up the rest of the time, so maybe 45 minutes to an hour. If you've got any questions, by all means, put your hand up and call them out, put them into chat. I'll hopefully be kept sane here by Fiona and others telling me that there's information that's coming in the chat that I can't see. I'm just trying to get used to Zoom again. I probably haven't used it since, I'm thinking 2020, 21 in our COVID days, but it's all roughly the same as Teams. So I'm just trying to find the bits that I'm looking for. So that's kind of the agenda. That's what we want to hopefully run through today. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Catherine, who will introduce herself and give you all that background information, which is vital for us. Catherine, hopefully you're on the call.
I'm here. So hello, I'm Catherine Jackson. As Glenn said, I am a clinician that works within cyber operations here at NHS England. I am a nurse by background. I do have some admittedly children social care experience, being that I worked in a hospice. So I was a clinical specialist for palliative care for a good number of years. So working not in the NHS and in a smaller organisation where you don't have the access to the big teams and there's less of you probably doing more, is something that I do have experience of. That being said, I hand my hands up and say sorry. If I say patient within the next however long, I mean service user. It's a slip of the tongue. I have to take patient out of my head. So if you hear me say patient, just imagine I'm absolutely meaning service user. I'm also joined on the call by Steve Shaw, who is one of our he's our lead regional security lead. So he's a cyber SME that works within NHS England. Just in case you have any more cyber related questions that I cannot answer, because I am a nurse that works within cyber rather than being a cyber SME myself. But without further ado, knowing that we've got to get through. I'll start by kind of setting the scene. So I apologise if lots of you have lots of cyber background, but I'm going as if we don't. So let's start with, what is cybersecurity? So in an increasingly digitised health and social care, cybersecurity has become an essential enabler for systems to continue to provide safe and effective care. And what is that? So basically, Google told me that cybersecurity is protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access and criminal use. And it has close links with information governance, so ensuring that we are maintaining the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of data. We often refer to that as the CIA triad, which is what the picture shows. And why that matters is if to protect our data, if a threat actor or someone who's not meant to get into your system, touches your data, regardless of what they do to it, that's a breach of confidentiality. If the threat actor or cybercriminal then went and made some changes to the data, so they've changed the integrity. So what staff are relying on that data being presented in a way that we can provide care to our service users and the public. If that data's changed, then that's an impact to integrity. So that's the decreasing reliance on digital systems and using that to inform care. If that's changed and we can't trust it, that is an issue. And then the other things that could happen is the threat actor makes that system, that data, unavailable to us. But that is a bad thing. We can't access it. But the other side of that is we might make it unavailable to contain the spread of that issue. So it could be that the system is attacked, and to present the spread of that cyber infection, for want of a better term, we make that system unavailable to preserve, to protect the rest of our network, which equally has an impact. And we've seen the impact, and I know there's been more recent cyber attacks within social care, but in 2022 there was the attack to the advanced group, and I know that was health related, but did also have social care impacts. So the staff rostering system, people were unable to see what visits that were needed. And post the incident, when they audited the organisations, 27% of those organisations were unable to reported that they had a missed visit. And so if you think about if you work in that area, what those visits might be. So they might be care visits, there might be visits to provide personal care, hygiene, food, medication visits. And it's all that impact of what does the service user, what does the public member do when they're waiting for that carer to come. Depending on them, do they try and get up themselves? But that's the risk of falling, injuring themselves if they're not able to provide that care, which is why we are doing it for them. Or do they, if they're unable, they could be sat in wet clothing, not getting drinks, not getting food. All has that knock-on effect to that patient service user's health. And then if you think of other things that the advanced attack showed, like it was reported that people were unable to see the resuscitation status of the people that were providing care for. And although if you might know your patients and know that status, but if there's been a change, if you've been on leave and you've come back and you can't access that record, and you're presented with someone that you're providing care that looks like they've deteriorated and needing resuscitation, if you don't have access to that care plan, to that documentation that tells you and guides you what they wish and what's in their best interest, again, that has the knock-on effect not only to the person that you're providing care for, but their wider family. And the health and care system is complex. One vulnerability might have a widespread impact. So the advanced attack, it came in one system and spread across. If you think of, even in the news, the only just a couple of weeks ago, the AWS issues, the AWS outage, that had that impact of lots of different systems. So it's not something that we that it's not in the thing that we think we've bought, it's what they use, what's down their supply chain, so to speak. So next slide for me, please, Fiona. So why cyber and why now? So following themes, it illustrate why a system-wide consistent approach to cyber resilience is needed. And we've on the side, we've taken some snapshots of headlines that have been in different reports, but there's approximately, and you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, 18,000 adult social care providers that are contracting with suppliers that are across a broad and varied landscape. So different providers providing different things for different reasons, and you might use a system in one way that someone else might use the same system in a different way. So it's understanding that broad and varied landscape. And there is a shift in attack just from people just taking the data from your system, but to service disruption. And the visibility of because you are making that contract, or your organization is making a contract with that supplier, and we all can't see what each other's contracts do, so it's that makes national coordination a lot harder to do. And a lack of categorization and visibility can lead to an inability to respond effectively. And next slide, please. So why does this matter for adult social care? So it's recognising that cyber risk is a business risk. So third-party cyber risks affect not only data, but service user safety, business continuity, and the organisation's reputation, which then makes it a business issue. I often hear when I speak to clinicians out again in more the health service, but they often say, I'm going to leave that to my IT people, to my cyber people over there. They're going to look after it for me. But it's understanding that we all play a part in maintaining the safety of our service users and the public in how they use their system, and also within business continuity. As a digital nurse, as I was prior to this role, I helped produce a business continuity plan, but I also am honest enough to say that if I wrote it again now, it wouldn't look the same, because it doesn't focus on how a cyber attack could mean your system is down for a longer time. If you think of how long Jaguar Land Rover was in the news for, and how long it was reporting that their factories were not making the Jaguars and the Land Rovers that they went to, it's that disruption, and that has business interruption. It's costly. If you are contracted, commissioned, then there's a loss of contracts and that impact. And most cyber attacks arise from human behaviour and not just technology. And so building awareness, accountability and leadership around cyber safety and cyber hygiene helps ensure that every member of staff is understanding their role in protecting information and services. And again, we're protecting vulnerable people from harm. So adult social care services hold and rely on highly sensitive personal data. No longer is it in a filing cabinet in an office somewhere. It's out there, it's hosted in the cloud. And so a cyber attack could directly affect the safety and well-being of people who depend on care. The 10-year plan talks about how information and all the digitisation across the health service is talked about information being available at a touch of a button at a fingertip. And actually, going back to the CIA triad, that could disappear if we had a cyber attack. And like I said, on a previous point, adult social care, just like across health and social care, is becoming increasingly digital, from electronic care plans, remote monitoring, and the process of sharing data between organisations. So cyber resilience will ensure that the services will not only, as we adopt new technology, but their security is embedded by design, because then this reduces the risks from legacy systems and helps maintain compliance with data protection and care quality standards. And it's my usual final message, but if it's that thing about making sure that your system is secure, because if yours isn't secure, your service users' data isn't safe. Therefore, your service users' care isn't safe. Is there anything, Steve, I think you're on the call, is there anything that you just want to add in the last couple of minutes before we hand over to Glenn?
No, I think you've covered everything there, Catherine. But if anybody has any questions about that, then I'd be certainly happy to try and help answer them. But otherwise, no, I think you've covered everything perfectly there, Catherine. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. So I'll hand back over to Glenn.
That's great. Thanks, Catherine. Oh, slides popped up. So you've got the background there, but essentially, what are we doing here within the cyber improvement program? So I think when it comes to our suppliers, we are centrally, certainly, and locally, regionally, and nationally, definitely, we only know about the suppliers that we contract ourselves. Across the thousands of different organizations within the system, that means that there's an awful lot of I'm trying to say what we're trying to achieve here is gain much more visibility over what the system is doing with their supply chain, how they contract with those suppliers, how they carry out assurance. All this is unsighted at the moment. So what this work stream is looking to do is to give us much greater visibility. We've got a number of boxes here. Each of these will be something that we're working on. A lot of these are working on concurrently, but essentially the first steps here is identifying who our supply chain or who our suppliers are, starting with the most critical. And the reason we want to identify the critical suppliers is obviously they're the ones, if there is an incident, as Catherine's described, they're the ones that can have the greatest impact. They're the ones that are supplying to many of the organizations within the system. So if one organization is attacked in some way, it could have a huge impact. Advance was a great example of the widespread impact of one company owning lots of different products and services across the health and social care sector, which had a huge impact. If we had greater visibility, we'd know where to direct our, I guess, better assurance processes going forward. So what we're doing here today, we're running a workshop to really just gain a bit more insight into who your critical suppliers are. But more than that, what we've done is we've built a methodology to allow us to do that. We've got criteria which allows us to score it, which we're hoping to get some feedback on, which hopefully we'll gain some more today. But we can also do that in slightly slower time with individual organisations if they wish, and we'll ask for volunteers at the end. But essentially what this will give us is a criteria that is deliverable and scalable so that we can use it across multiple systems. Some of you might be familiar with the DSPT system across different frameworks we use for procurement. So if we can embed those that new criteria that we're building across those systems, we can have a consistent way of assessing who our critical suppliers are. The other areas of the cyber improvement program, which I'll just mention briefly here, is new contracts are coming out, standardized contracts, which allow us to ensure that suppliers, as part of that, the new and improved terms and conditions, have far more accountability for their cyber security. So that will be part of a rolling system that will go out across different frameworks that we use to procure and give us that standardized approach moving forward. The third box here is looking at a risk management framework. So this essentially is providing new guidelines for assurance, but also allowing us centrally to test those different systems that could be used for third-party risk management assurance on some of those critical suppliers, which we're starting to pull together now through these workshops. And the last one here is really providing that visibility through a centralized system or potentially a platform where we can bring that information together, carry out assurance centrally, but also give all organizations across the system visibility of what they're doing, but also what their neighbors are doing, what they're doing regionally in their area in terms of assurance of potentially the same suppliers. So it gives a much more visible kind of structure to what our supply chain looks like. And when I say supply chain, I mean not the NHSE one, but what all of our suppliers are across the whole of the many organizations that we run. So essentially what we're here today is that first step. We want to understand what that criteria looks like, how it can be improved, and your feedback is definitely welcome. So we'll go into a bit more detail of how that will run now. And I'm going to hand over, I think it's either to Liam or Holly. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. This one's for me. So hi everyone. I'm Holly Bainbridge. Been working at NHS England for the best part of a year now on how we come up with criteria to determine who our critical suppliers are across the whole of the health and social care sector. So so as we go through this guidance, you'll notice you may see the word patient at some point, but we do mean service user, of course, for adult and social care. So that's just one thing to watch out. But hopefully we've got the slide deck correct. So what we've got on the screen here is, I guess, a summary of where we're up to so far with this criteria. So in the red outlined box on the left are the 2 criteria we've landed on so far for determining criticality. So we've got service user harm, and then we've got operational impact. So service user harm is all about if one of your supplier's services or products was compromised or unavailable, would there be any harm to any service users? And for the wider health sector, that will be, would there be any patient harm as a result? Because ultimately, given the nature of the services you provide, care for others, that's ultimately the main thing why we're here is to provide care and make sure that people, service users, patients are safe. So that's the main criteria. The second one is called operational impact. So this is all about, again, if those supplier services or products are compromised, actually, would there be an implication on the performance of what we're going to refer to as like an essential function? And we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail about what that means. But essentially, it's the inability for part of your organisation, a particular function, to not be able to operate due to the service or product being unavailable. So these are the 2 criteria, and they're the 2 that we're going to focus on today when we get into more of the interactive part of the session. What we've also got on the screen here is other information that we're looking to pick up as part of this wider programme, and then what that will mean. So the criteria on the left tells you, is your supplier critical, yes or no? The items we reference in the blue boxes there, this is what we're calling cyber and information security risk detail. So as the programme matures and this criteria matures, we're going to be trying to collect this information on these supplier products and services as well. So this is things like data types. By that we mean, is there, for example, patient data in there? What source of data is held in the system? How much data is there? That's the volume of data. Are we talking a few hundred records, or are we talking hundreds, thousands, millions? Data hosting is where the service product data is actually hosted physically. Data access is about how often do we need to access this data. So if you think about some electronic patient record systems, we need access to those pretty much 24 hours a day. Other services, maybe not so much. Availability is about who can access that data. So is it just people from our organisation on a need-to-know basis, or can the supplier access it as well? And then data ownership is about who ultimately is going to own that data. So those blue boxes, that's information data we're going to be looking to collect. And what that tells you then is, based on your critical suppliers, what is the cyber and information security risk posture? So if you've got a supplier that's, critical, but actually it's got huge volumes of data, there's a higher risk there than another one that's got maybe less data. So the blue boxes tell you what is the risk posture. And what we do with all of that then is we get to what we're calling defined outcomes. So this information, if you think we're trying to do this for the whole of the sector, which is a huge undertaking in itself, but that's going to tell us things like, well, what's the concentration risk? So how many different organisations across the country are actually using this same product or service? Because if that went down, it wouldn't just be an impact on one organisation, it might be widespread and an even bigger problem. But ultimately, what we're also looking to do is we're looking to increase assurance across some of these critical suppliers, particularly from a cyber risk perspective as well. So those really big critical ones, there will be, and there's a whole other work stream I think we touched on previously around assurance. What's the right level of assurance that the sensor will deploy on those? And again, that's got to be commensurate to the risk posture there. So in a kind of nutshell, that's what we're trying to do. It's been a really technical thing to try and unpick, and I think what's also important to note is that this is not set in stone. So we've got those 2 criteria now today. Over time, that might evolve. So there's a whole governance process around this as well, and there'll be clear comms pushed out to the sector too around that. But this is where we are so far. I think, Fiona, if you could flick on to the next slide, that would be great. So this here is more visual, just to place in people's minds. So we're going to come on to the detail behind those 2 criteria. that we're going to focus on today. But what we're really looking for is we're looking for critical suppliers to really be at the top of the triangle. So if you think about how many suppliers organisations across the whole sector have, we know that there's, I think the number 80,000 has been mentioned for the health sector before. We know it's way more than that. It's really difficult to get a definitive number, but we're really looking for those top sort of 2 to 5% of suppliers. And the reason for that as well is that when we get to the criteria, you'll see that the way we ask you to think about it and score them is going to be based on a sliding scale. So we're going to ask you to score some of your suppliers 0 to 5, with 5 being the most critical, those catastrophic ones. So this is just to frame it in your mind that that's what we're looking for today. And I think on that note, I'm going to pass over to Liam. So I think we can move on to the next slide, please, Fiona.
Thanks, Holly. And lovely to meet everybody. I've been part of the delivery partner team supporting NHS England and the cyber improvement programme for the last couple of months. You'd be glad to know it's just the one slide I've got to cover. And the slide we've got here hopefully builds on some of that theory you've just heard about and the criteria we've come up with to help identify critical suppliers. Then really think in more practical terms what that might mean for your organisations and how we can help you identify who those critical suppliers are within social care. And it's as Glenn said earlier, it's those suppliers are the first priority who will be particularly important to ensure are well prepared for a potential cyber attack and will sit at the top of that triangle that Holly talked to on the last slide. And if we think particularly about that operational impact criteria that Holly mentioned, so how do we identify which suppliers are critical to your operations, where if those suppliers were to fail or be severely impacted due to a cyber attack, it could significantly disrupt one of your essential functions. And when we say essential functions, what we basically mean is, what are those really important outsourced services you might have that are maybe handled or delivered by a third party rather than by yourselves in-house? And who is it that's supplying those services to your organisation? And I think that question will really link into the interactive exercise that Riz is shortly going to take us through. As what we really want to hear your thoughts and perspectives on this in terms of the supplier landscape in adult social care and what this might mean for you, so that we can then hopefully provide you with, so you're equipped to go and map your suppliers and work out where that risk really lies from your perspective. And then to help you hopefully get thinking with that, we've put some examples on the slide here and sort of across the bottom 2 levels of that triangle. Firstly, as to what some of those essential functions or services might be for you. So is that care provision? Is it planning for the delivery of that care? Is it medication management? And then below that, who are the suppliers who provide the goods, the services, the systems, the data, which support and underpin the delivery of those functions and services within your organization. So that might be rostering, it might be a case management system, it might be a payroll provider, it might be the supplier that deals with catering and waste disposal. Maybe it's an organization that provides your IT and network infrastructure or electronic care records, for example. And ultimately, whether those outsourced services and the suppliers that provide them are either digital, so a system provider, or non-digital, so a catering supplier, understanding sort of who those critical suppliers are as a first step is really important, because it's those that we want to make sure have that robust cyber posture and are really prepared. So if they are impacted by a cyber attack at some point, the impact of that is mitigated on your organizations and others across the sector. So on that note, I think I'm handing over to you, Riz, am I? Or is it back to you first, Glenn?
It's back to me first, Liam. We've got a couple of screens here which I'll take you through very briefly because they're quite busy and obviously a lot of words are on here. And what we'd normally do here as part of a workshop is send these out in advance so there's a bit of familiarization. But equally, this information will be available when we go through the tooling section, which Riz will open up and hopefully we'll be able to utilize that in just a couple of minutes. But what we're looking to do here across those 2 main criteria that Holly described, service user harm and operational impact, is we've scored them 0 to 5. And what this screen here is, it gives you some guidance as to what we mean by, well, 0's relatively straightforward. There is no service user harm at all if this supplier was to stop providing those goods, products or services. And what we describe it in that way because essentially what we're looking to do is it doesn't necessarily mean that a cyber incident has caused this issue. It could be for a number of reasons, but what we need to do is look at from the point of view of that service product is no longer available to us. It goes right up to catastrophic. Catastrophic essentially is where there is serious and irreparable harm to a service user. And then there's a scale in between. So when you think about that essential function, as Liam's described, and the supplier who supports it or provides that service, if they were to be unavailable, where on that scale would that particular supplier sit? And this one is for this particular description here is for service user harm. If we go to the next one, we've scored it in a similar way. So on the next page, we have the operational impact, again, from 0 to 5. 0 being there is no impact at all if we were to lose that supply. So hopefully there won't be too many of those for us to describe today, leading us up to obviously catastrophic impact. So this is where there would be serious detrimental harm to the operation that you perform for a sustained period, and there is little or no suitable replacement. So in other words, things would really go badly if that supplier was to be made unavailable. Again, we'll go through these descriptors as and when we come to maybe when we work some examples through with you in a moment, because it's easier than just me describing it piece by piece. I think this is the point now where we're going to hand over to Riz. What Riz is going to do is going to open up an Excel spreadsheet. It's quite a rudimentary way of doing it, but we've got some drop downs to help us speed up the process. And at this point, what we're looking to do is for you to provide us with some examples of suppliers who you believe are towards the top end of these scales. So where there is major or significant, what we describe as catastrophic harm resulting from the loss of those suppliers. So perhaps think about what an essential function is that that you use, who the supplier is, and then let's give us, just put your head above the parapet, put your hand up, let us know that supplier, and we'll work through the example with you. And if people want to chip in because you use the same supplier, or maybe a different supplier for a similar function, by all means chip in where you think if you want to describe the impact it would have on your organization. So Riz, if you're there, I'm going to ask you to start sharing your screen. So Fiona,
Just
I don't know
stopping sharing mine. I just thought I'd dive in quickly. Sorry, whilst Riz is getting his screen up and running. I know on the call we've got a really nice selection of a handful of care providers, but we've also got a few representatives from care associations. These group of professionals are really, really knowledgeable on their sort of more local care market, but aren't actually delivering care in a setting per se. And I just wanted to check. It would be great to have their input because I know they'll have loads of knowledge about care, about the supply chain. Are you happy for them to contribute sort of examples that maybe aren't fully detailed in their delivery, or sort of thinking about care providers they've maybe come across or worked with? Does that feel okay for you guys?
Fiona, one thing I was going to say is we're not going to hold anyone to account here. This isn't a test. We don't know the answers, and that you guys know an awful lot more about your own suppliers than we do. What we're looking to do here is to understand, does the methodology make sense? Is there anything there that's confusing so we can improve the guidance? Secondary to that is we'll work through examples of suppliers, but we won't, like I say, hold you to account on it. The information is 100% accurate. You're giving your kind of your best guess at this stage. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we might ask to do more detailed workshops if we get some volunteers to do that outside of this session, where we will want to, you to bring maybe people who've got more experience or more knowledge of that supplier in your organization. But for today, like I said, we just want to try and test that the guidance is clear, as opposed to the central point of that being collecting information. So
I'm just thinking on the call, we've got Angie, Jenny, Mel, Nada. Sorry if I've missed anyone else, and I'm just scrolling through the list very quickly. Who are all LSOs, and so please, have your critical eye and do feed in, even though you don't necessarily have your own supply chain.
Cool. Riz, you good to go?
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Fiona. Apologies in advance for any strange noises today. I'm in the office and we've got a lot of loud colleagues around. But Yeah, I'll try my best. So just a quick demo of the tool, starting off with the cover page, which gives a bit of information regarding the program, version control, and a lot of the key authors behind it. Then moving just onto the instructions tab, where you got a bit of an introduction to the aims of the program, what we're aiming to do as part of the delivery. Got some fields here to insert your details in, whether that be your name, email address, the date of submission, your organization type, region. But for the purpose of this, I've just put down care home because we're going to have multiple entries in a moment. So just scrolling down a bit more, you'll see some of the key field headers. You'll see some of the key service category primary functions that you'd have to select from in terms of the drop down, the supplier name, and some of the free text fields in case your supplier name is not on the list that we've recorded. So just moving on to the next tab, this is where a lot more instructions are provided regarding the criteria guidance, some of the breakdown of the scoring, so it's a bit more easier to refer to. So you've got both the scorings that we're going to be assessing today, both the criteria we're going to be assessing today. You've got patient service user harm and operational, and you've got a bit of an interactive technique there to just sort of jump in between both of those, as well as the really nice colorful pyramid we have on the side that provides a bit more of a hierarchy / breakdown of the scoring there. Okay, and this is the main tab where we're looking, which is the most important part, which is used to collect the data. Just a quick demo of some of the fields. So we've got a numbering system right here. We've got the organization, which is a free text field, because again, a lot of these social care organizations won't be recorded on any systems we have access to. So at this point, I'll be collecting this data when we start inputting the names of the suppliers in each of these rows. You've got the organization type, which was a bit of a last minute addition because we thought, why not just break it down by organization to see whether this supplier is specific to a certain sort of care home or a type of care home. And we just thought it'd be a good exercise to collect that data along the way as well. You've got the service / product category. So this is part of the essential functions and essential services that you'd be scoping out as part of your care home within social care. And you've got like a lot of different categories down here, whether that be an EPR system, anything to do with finance, transport, infrastructure, anything in relation to your organization in that sort of way. And then you've got the most important field, which is the name of your supplier. Now, if we've not captured it here, there's an option to sort of name it in the free text field besides that here. But yeah, we're hopefully we've captured a lot of different suppliers out there, and a lot of what's available on the Crown Commercial Service website. We pretty much use that to sort of inform a lot of the suppliers on our list, including company house and a lot of the other data that we've tried to extract from a lot of different areas. And then sort of moving into the name or the product, the name of the product or service supplied by that supplier. You'd have to input the data into this field. You'd have the option of selecting whether this specific product or supplier is a digital product or service, whether it supports an essential function more than what's already sort of included right here, and then anything to sort of include additional comments, whether that be a specific type of version of the system or a specific name of the supplier or a change in the name of supplier, etc. And then the most important part where we'll sort of break down the scoring in terms of patient / service user harm and operational. Please ignore the patient harm bit at the top right here. We're just in the midst of updating that as well. But we are looking at patient / service user harm. So service user is the main bit for social care. And then we've got the option to sort of score operational from 0 to 5 on this row as well in this cell. So I thought we'd probably kick it off in terms of organizations. So I'll just hand it back to the group here to sort of, guide me along the way. Is there any sort of organization that wants to sort of start off first in terms of naming their critical supplier, or if they have anyone in mind in terms of testing this out? And apologies if the background noise is a bit too loud.
Any of our social care providers want to sort of kick off by sharing They're examples of a critical supplier. Feel free to write in the chat if you don't want to talk in person. Oh, we've got a hand up. Mel.
Sorry, hi Fiona, hi everyone. Yeah, I just obviously I'm more from an LSO kind of care partnership perspective, but I think obviously all the DSCR suppliers are the major kind of ones that people would be concerned about. We've done a bit of work with providers locally, and I think their concern was they asked the DSCR supplier what happens if anything goes wrong with you know your logistics and where you're storing data and being able to access it. And they seem to get a bit, sometimes they get sent a really large document and it's so complex they don't really understand what they're looking at. They don't know the areas. They just sort of mirrored here, it's here and there, it's never going to happen. That's kind of the response they're getting from suppliers. And I know obviously you can kind of manage that through the assured supplier list, which would be really helpful. But I think those ones and the meds, so any electronic medication records as well, really critical, meal delivery, particularly in kind of dom care, those types of things. Most are using like a payroll system like Sage or Xero. So those ones be, you know, critical in different ways. DBS services as well, if that leaves people short staffed because DBS services have kind of collapsed, that type of thing. Most are using sort of Microsoft as well, so obviously those ones. Just trying to think, and a lot of them use kind of Indeed and stuff like that for recruitment. So some of those areas they're holding some sort of data onto as well. And a lot are using Ring doorbells, even in different settings. So in domiciliary care, they might use them. Sometimes they'll use them in their offices, that type of thing, and central kind of locations. So there has always been discussion around how safe is that, who's the account holder, and that type of thing as well. And then I think there's obviously WhatsApp. A lot of them use that to communicate with their staff about really quick changes to people as well. So that side of it as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that, Mel. Is there anybody else that wants to sort of name out any specific suppliers and we can score them as we sort of go through this tooling?
Riz, something Mel mentioned there was, I'm just trying to, there's lots of helpful stuff in the chat around energy suppliers. We mentioned Microsoft, you mentioned using some of the communication tooling. We've had these from other organizations, but there's a couple of points there which I think might be really useful in terms of social care. One of them was that electronic medicines provision. Sorry, I didn't quite understand or write that one down, but it might be useful to maybe start there, as that's something probably that's really very important to make sure we get the right medicines to our service users. I just wondered if there's someone who might want to just give an example of a supplier in that area.
So Atlas are quite a big supplier of EMARs, so you might want to take a look at them. Atlas.
I'm not sure you caught that, Riz.
Apologies. How do you spell Atlas? Is it ATLIS?
Yeah.
Oh, Atlas.
ATLAS.
AS. Okay. Okay, that's not on our list. So it's just a matter of bring that right here. Oh, I think I've got scroll lock on. There we go. In terms of product or service category, would that fall into medicines, wouldn't it? So let's see if we've got EPR and past system supplier. Here you go, electronic medication management. In terms of the organization, is there any specific organization type that would be using this, or is this applicable across a majority of them?
This would be relevant across all sort of social care organisations. They would either use a paper-based version or electronic, but obviously this is relevant for anyone using an electronic version. And Mel and some of the others out there, I'm guessing from your experience, actually the numbers that are going to electronic medication administration records is rapidly increasing. So that would be a risk with regard to proportionality that is quite significantly growing I mean, does that feel fair, Mel, from your experience? Got a few thumbs up, so.
Okay, and in terms of a digital product or service, that would be a yes. It might support a lot more essential functions than just medicine, but that can be also scoped out by once we sort of circulate this tool around post this call to you all. In terms of the patient slash service user harm, we've got a breakdown of the scoring system at the top here, from catastrophic being 5 to 0 being no harm if this was to sort of go down or be impacted by a cyber attack. So I'm just thinking in terms of the scoring for this, what would the consensus be? Would it have a catastrophic impact, or would it have something in the on the lines of considerable? So this is a bit of
Riz,
the
sorry, are we assuming that this is
Yeah.
the impact if there isn't a robust business continuity plan? Because actually, if you've got, you know, like if you've got backups and, you know, other options, if it goes wrong, then I guess your risk is significantly reduced. But if we are assuming that this just goes and we haven't sort of got another backup, obviously the impact is going to be bigger, higher.
Yeah. I think, Glenn, it's along the lines of if there's no backup, right, or in place.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, Fiona, one we're often asked. So what we generally, what we try to do is say, okay, well, within the context of you do have a business continuity plan, if that one was to go down, you can include within your assessment what your plan is in terms of a replacement. But part of this is them looking at the long-term effect of that supply being unavailable. So if your business continuity planning is you can do it for a short period using, you know, paper and pen is often used in terms of potentially some data transfer. That's not going to last particularly long. Would you be able to bring in a different supplier quickly in order to replace them? So it depends really on the type of organization. So we ask you to take that into consideration, because in a real world scenario, that's where the operational impact will be mitigated. I think in terms of patient harm, though, I think it's probably, or sorry, service user harm particularly, is think about it as if that was to go down and you did not have that plan in place. So for operational impact, it's probably slightly different. So for maybe the first score here on service users is think about it. Riz, if you could just read out what catastrophic means, and then we can sort of work our way down as to whether that would be for, if, you know, if this particular supplier atlas was to go offline, what would be the immediate impact to your service users?
Yeah. So starting off in number 5, catastrophic. So any permanent life-changing incapacity and any condition for which the prognosis is death or permanent life-changing incapacity, severe injury or severe incapacity from which recovery is not expected in the short term. Apologies, I've had to scroll across a lot. Let me zoom out a bit. 4 being major, permanent life-changing incapacity and any condition for which the prognosis is death or permanent life-changing incapacity, severe injury or severe incapacity from which recovery is not expected in the short term for a single patient. Considerable being 3, which is the severe injury or severe incapacity from which recovery is expected in the short term for a single or patient, or severe psychological trauma for a single patient. I'm sure it means by patient if it's single. But number 2 is significant minor injury or injuries from which recovery is not expected in the short term, or significant psychological trauma. Number 1 being minor injury from which recovery is expected in the short term, minor psychological upset, inconvenience, any negligible consequence, and 0 being no patient or service user harm if this was to be impacted by a cyber attack.
Riz, there's some scores kind of coming through in the chat that it's likely to be, another one's just popped up. Yeah, so in terms of the scoring, probably 4 and 5 has been mooted, although I've just had a comment coming in, 2 or 3 potentially in most cases. That may be because there may be some good mitigations in terms of if it was to go down, people know their patients, they know what their medication should be potentially, or it's recorded paper-based, I don't know. So there may be a difference with different organizations, but I think for the purposes here, it will cause a major impact, I would imagine. If you were to issue the wrong medication, or if you didn't know it and you couldn't issue any medication, then that obviously would have a significant impact, which could ultimately end up with major permanent life change or potentially death. So I think for the purposes here, I think we'll put 4, but bearing in mind that for your own organisation, you might score it lower. Again, that comes back to what processes you have in place. Catherine, is there anything you wanted to add on this particular supplier for this process or this function?
Obviously,
Catherine's-
I don't know Atlas as a thing, but it's also looking at suppliers like that. What else does it do? So you could have a business continuity plan that I'm going to go back to paper for the administration of medication, but it's also thinking about, does that system do anything else? Does it help? Can I order medication for my service user without having to get in my car and get a GP to write a green prescription and take that to a nearby chemist? So I think it's understanding, which you will know as you're looking at your systems and what it does, what's the impact of the system as a whole, and does your business continuity plan cover all aspects, which I don't know, and which is why I'm not the right person to score it, but it's looking at in the on the whole.
Yeah. Is everyone happy with the scoring for the service user harm for this, if this was to be impacted? Feel free to sort of put it in the chat if you disagree with 4.
Ask a question of you, because
Yeah.
we're thinking of going for digital care planning system and email, and some of the solutions for digital care planning have either an integrated solution that you would have to kind of procure separately, or with like Log My Care, that's sort of their email part is part of their own product. Is it worth considering that we are possibly going to have a third-party solution within another solution?
And that's a good thing when you're looking at your organization. It's a good thing to call out, because some people, if I go back to hospital land, some hospitals buy a product for each thing. Some people buy one thing that does lots of things. So I think it's understanding that it might not be that your full patient record might do all of these things, which then has a bigger impact on the risk to service users if everything went, because the whole system went, versus if one aspect went. So it is part of your assessment what else you've got and how it's linked together. It might not fully answer your question, but I do agree with what you were saying, Michelle.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do here is really is that visibility piece. We're not looking to necessarily assess how you should procure or what you want to do with that particular company, because I think in future what we're looking to do is make sure that the most critical, i.e. those that supply lots of services to a single organization, lots of services to lots of organizations, have the highest level of assurance and, I guess, understanding of what their cybersecurity is going forward. So there's no, like I said earlier, there's no right or wrong answers here. How you use that service is down to your own organization. And this is kind of almost scoring by committee. So it's not the ideal situation for us, because people, like I said, different organizations would be doing different things with these suppliers. So don't worry too much about that. But I think the really good thing is what we're collecting here is actually the feedback and the transcript from this webinar, so that we can really understand a bit more about how you work, what you do, the different types of things. So it's good if you want to shout things out. I think we'll probably score 4 here for now, but I said your organization might be different. And we'll have a look at operational impact as well.
Yeah. So the next one is operational impact, and it's pretty much similar. You have to score from 0 to 5, 5 being catastrophic, 0 being no impact. In terms of the definitions, 5 being the supplier disruption resulting complete and immediate failure of a essential function, and a substitutable product or service is not available or is available in the long term. And then you've got the other ones, 4 being major impact, 3 being moderate, 2 being minor, and 1 being minimal. Apologies for if you can't see the 1 for 0. I think it's just spilt over a bit in the text box, but we'll have that sorted as well before we circulate the tool out. But 0, if I just go back to it quickly, it would be no impact, so no observable disruption on operational delivery. And let's see if it lets me. Yeah. But yeah, it pretty much be no observable disruption on operational delivery. Let me just go back to the operational scoring. So from a 0 to 5, any comments regarding what we should score this one in terms of the operational impact it would have if it was cyber attacked or made unavailable?
Got a few comments coming through in the chat, Riz. I'm not sure if you've seen. Mel said she'd suggest quite high. We've got sort of 3 or 4 proposed from Jenny.
Yeah,
it's
I think for it to become a 5, you would look at there's essential function for your organization is knocked out completely, and there is no kind of immediate replacement, or you wouldn't be able to replace them potentially even in the long term because it may be too embedded in your organization, or it's just provides too important a service that just can't be easily replaced. If there is some level of replaceability, but it would take some time, that's where 4 might come in, but it would need to have a big impact. In terms of medicine, okay, again, it sounds like there probably is replaceability within that process. You know, there are other providers or other ways of doing it, whether it's going back to the old school way that we used to do, or if it doesn't cause a huge impact, then maybe that lowers it to a 3. So that's kind of the balance here. So again, it's probably different for different organizations, but it sounds like we're all scoring 3s and 4s here. So Riz, if you want to maybe take 4 as a worst case, that's not the best way to describe it, but just to show that, you know, I think that score is probably about right in terms of the operational impact of losing this system.
Yeah, the consensus seems 4. Okay. So I'll just pick a 4. Thank you for that. So that's the first supplier down. It wasn't too long of a process, hopefully. But yeah, happy to take on any further ones if anybody has suggestions. Please don't be shy and just please be imaginative when it comes to this.
There's some really good intel in the chat as well. Yeah. Mel, sorry, this might just be helpful for others. Mel was just saying that obviously the risk will vary according to whether it's community or residential setting. I think that's really worth, you know, probably being aware of when considering both health and social care services, I guess. I wondered whether digital social care records was worth looking at next, because that generally encompasses quite a lot of the care planning element of an individual's care, but I don't know if other people have got other suggestions.
Yeah, do we want to have a look at digital social care records, everyone?
Yeah.
There's thumbs up and agreement in the chat.
Brilliant. Okay, so in terms of the product itself, that would be electronic. So that would be a PAS system, right? So EPR and PAS system suppliers. So just translating that for social care, that's the equivalent of what it is in the NHS. So we've got an electronic patient record system, but in the social care context, it's known as a digital social care record. So in terms of supplier name, is there any particular supplier people want to mention? Please feel free to put it in the chat. Access. Is that Access Group or is that just Access? Nourish, PCS, some good suggestions. Nourish mentioned twice. Log My Care.
Someone said that Nourish and PCS have about 75% of the market share in their area. So one of them might be a good one to call out.
Yeah, Nourish. Would this be the right way to spell it? Just checking with with the chat. So is that Nourish Care Systems Limited? We'll go with that. But I'll just call it Nourish in case.
Yeah. Sounds like it is. I imagine
Yeah.
it probably is.
And in terms of the name of the product, is there a specific name they have for the product, or is that also known as Nourish? Is that Birdie is the product name, or is that Birdie as a supplier?
That was another, sorry, that was another supplier option.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Nourish Care Limited, product name Nourish Care. Oh, okay, thank you for that. And that is a digital product. And in terms of an additional essential function, if it does support that, please feel free to mention it here. Apart from just your digital social care record, if it does supply anything else for you, that's where you just mention in terms of what it supplies, whether that be something ridiculous like catering, or you know, something along the lines of that.
Ruth,
But and yeah.
Sorry, just on an earlier question that I think it was Mel that said, would this be where you'd put if it? So I don't know. No, I've heard of Nourish, but for argument's sake, say Nourish also was one of those systems that did your EMR at the same time. Is that where you'd call it out? Because that's two functions that it covers. It's just a question that's popped into my head.
Yeah, that's right. So it would, if it does cover another area, you just put it in the additional comments box, and then we'll try to include it as update the list of the essential functions that we've got here on the left as well, to get that included. But if it does support something else, you can mention it in the additional comments box, or you can mention it right here in the essential functions box. They're both free text, but hopefully, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just moving on to the scoring side of this for Nourish. Any specific scorings you would give this if this was impacted by a cyber attack or anything along the lines of that? What would you score that from a 5, between 0 to 5, and 5 being catastrophic impact? Let me just go back to the patient harm. So 5 being catastrophic, permanent life-changing incapacity again, and then 0 being no patient service user harm. So definitely somewhere between 5, 4, or 3, I reckon. But feel free to put that in the chat.
Starting to get a couple of 4s in the chat, Riz.
Yeah.
And
Brilliant.
4 in community.
Thank you for that. Brilliant. Consensus looks like 4. Depending on care setting. That's interesting. Cool. If there's no more comments on that criteria, let's move on to operational. And let me select operational. It's a pretty fun exercise when you go through it and sort of name all your critical suppliers out as well. It's just interesting knowing. But when you look at operational, apologies, I think my screen went blank there. For operational, same sort of concept between 5 and 0, 5 being catastrophic, 0 being no operational impact. What impact would this have if this was to go down? Please feel free to put the score in the chat. 3 or 4. Wow, it's like everyone's synced on the scoring.
Again, you know, it's just coming up again, though, about the variability around provider type and size and where they are. And, you know, again, it's just worth, I think, having that in mind. You know, actually saying sometimes the smaller providers possibly know a lot more of the information is sort of, you know, retained internally, which isn't necessarily so robust, but it's worth acknowledging that therefore the risk is slightly mitigated.
Yeah. It looks like the consensus is 4. So I'll pick a 4 for that. So that would give you a major sort of harm to service users and a major impact to operational. That's another one completed. Well done, and thank you all for that. And do you want to go for a 3? Just conscious of time. We probably only have enough time to probably go through one more before we sort of wrap up and sort of take questions or talk about the next steps in terms of this. So please feel free to suggest one more, if anyone has.
Before, sorry, just a quick question. Fiona, there are a number of different suppliers there, and this might be actually a wider question, but if we were, what we would do as part of the wash up here is collect the other types of suppliers that were mentioned, and would they get similar scores because they do the same thing, but for different organisations, just who they've procured to do it?
I've been jotting down a bit of a list actually, and I wonder if, Glenn, we could always pick this up offline and almost go
Yes.
through and give it our scores. We have got some very lovely engaged LSOs on the call who perhaps would be able to give us their input as well. So I might go and speak nicely to them afterwards, and we can
Okay.
perhaps follow that up separately from the call. Looks like everyone's keen to do rostering systems as their third option, and it was also the one that I'd starred, so on the
Yeah.
same
And
page.
and it was one that I mentioned a staff rostering system at the start of the day. So
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Let's go for staff rostering. So if you go down on the drop down, you can see that it's one of the service categories we've included as part of the essential functions that would feed into an organization like this. So you've got rostering and staff management. In terms of suppliers, feel free to spam the chat, if I said the right word there, with any sort of suppliers you can suggest for this. Let's
Someone
introduce
suggested
Ross.
Log My Care,
Yeah, Log
although
My
there's many
Care.
others coming through as well.
Ah, there you go. It's on our list. Wow, there's a lot. Even Datex. Didn't know
you'd
they
be
did that.
surprised what Datex do.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
it's looking like Atlas introduced rostering and Log My Care, which also we've heard those names come up in the EPR and the medicine management bit. So I think it's also kind of what I was talking about, what the question I asked you earlier on about additional essential functions. It's kind of if you were an organisation that had Atlas for everything. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Don't panic. And like Glenn said, we're not here to talk about procurement, but it's understanding the risk and the criticality of those services. Because if one of them went down, then what impact would that have if all your functions, rather than just bad enough trying to fix one of them, but if you had to do lots of them, it's how that would impact.
yeah, that's right. So let's go for any suggestions, or should we go for Log My Care? Any preferences, anyone? There's a lot of different ones here. I mean, pretty much if they consistently went down, it wouldn't really matter in terms of who the supplier is, but they provide the same service. So in terms of a product name for Log My Care, is there a specific product name that they go with, or is it just called Log My Care rostering or something? Anyone? I'll
I'm
just
not
go for Log
sure
My
is if
Care.
you go on to criticality, I will research the product name if that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay. Digital service, and let's go on to the most important bit. So again, same concept. Let's start off with patient and service user harm. So from a score of 5 to 0, if your rostering system went down, what impact would that have on service users? You can sort of brainstorm concepts in your head or sort of imagine the scenario playing out. Please feel free to comment in the chat. Honestly, I didn't know social care would be this quiet, but yeah, it's interesting. Thursday afternoon.
It's on the end of the week, lol. I mean, I've never known Angie be this quiet.
So Mel's put getting the right person to the right service user at the right time. And again, someone's put it depends, because I suppose it does depend on your where you work and what you're using it for. So as a nurse who worked on a ward, we probably printed off the rota, so I knew where I was coming to work, and I probably got it written down. But if you're using it to work out where your visits are, that's the different part, I would guess.
Okay, we've got a couple of 4s and 5s. We've got 3 or 4. I see a domiciliary care 4 or 5, and then you've got residential being 3. So different scoring depending on different contexts or types of care home. High impact in community and less in supported living. Should we go with perhaps 4?
I think
Actually,
that
it's
seems
another.
to be the middle ground.
Yeah, 4 looks good.
Yeah, I think Riz, we're collecting the different types of organisation here as well, so we can have a look at that in wash up as to, you know, it's almost we could have 2 different scores here, one for community based and one on residential.
Yeah. And in terms of operational impact, same concept from 5 to 0, 5 being catastrophic, 0 being no operational impact. What impact would this have if this was not available? Please feel free to comment in the chat. I think I should send one of my colleagues, Harry, sitting beside me over to social care, to liven the mood up.
They're all thinking correct, Riz. I think we've got lowest of 3. We've got some 4s. Again, the difference between residential care and community.
Angie's got her hand up as well.
Yeah. Sorry, Angie.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. It would be the difference between residential care and community, because residential care, they tend to have people there so they can chat and say, can you cover this shift? Can you do that shift? They'll know their routine really well, but out in the community, they're here, there and everywhere. So keeping that would be higher up on the scale. So again, like I said, it's different, or like we've all said, it's different settings and different scoring.
That's right. Thank you for that. It's funny enough, we're based in a county hall, so council building that's actually got social care next to us. Wish I could just go over and ask as well. So are we in agreement? Okay, that's interesting. So we've got a mix for operational impact. Major, so 4, some 3. Okay, possibly 3. Consensus looks like 3 to me.
There seems to be a fair number of 4s, 4, possibly 3, 4 or 5, and I think again it depends on the setting, which is what we said for service user harm.
For this, should we aim for 4 in terms of operational impact?
I think so. Riz, we'll say this is for community care, and then we'll take a note and we'll lower those scores if it was residential.
I think the service, when we did the service user harm, we were basing it on the community side, which from the consensus in the chat seemed to have the higher risk scores.
So feel free to sort of populate comments like this in the tooling as well, if you do say. Would be 4.
Yeah, and I think Mel has put a theme that's gone through that if they're all owned over one umbrella and an organisation buys the one product, which is what we were alluding to, it becomes a bigger issue, because it's like I said, it's not just it you know, if I've bought a rostering system and a care record and a different system that's doing different things, and one of them went, and I could still function with all, it's just an aspect, but if I've got one that's all encompassing, then that might pose a bigger risk, because everything's gone and I can't just go, well, it's okay, I can leave that bit working in the corner. So it's understanding that forms part of the risk and the risk assessment.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, that's interesting. And in terms of concentration risk, which sort of relies on one supplier for everything, it would have a huge sort of impact in that space as well. could cloud-based back solutions make it better? We've got David on the call if he wants to answer that. David, you got 1 minute if you do. Okay, seems like
audio. Do you want to ask the question again, Rose?
yeah. So could cloud-based back solutions make it better?
It depends. So I've started a conversation with Catherine in the background about this, because I'm hearing from people how, you know, a single provider provides you with a solution which may be cloud-based, but each of you may find different impacts from that cloud provider. There's a cumulative one. So if you were to lose your rostering with a supplier, they've got no idea how important that loss of rostering is, if that makes sense. So if Log My Care were to put in place a high quality cloud-based solution, in theory they could support you better if things went wrong. I believe that was the case for Advance, but by the same token that might cost you more money and might not be what you want. So there's a lot of discussion to be had about this, but I think it's really important when we start thinking about, we've not really done this before. More importantly, we've not done it as a community. So people who've traditionally made decisions about criticality probably don't understand the impact on the ground. And by the same token, the people that are assessing on the ground don't have the visibility that, you know, Log My Care goes down. Well, me as a business, me as a provider, I'm in trouble. But as is the guy next door, as the 4 guys over there and the 50 guys in the next county, this is all of a sudden a national problem. And we saw this when we had the Advance incident. Nobody knew how embedded Advanced was and how diverse its solutions were until it went down. And then all of a sudden, it's like, hang about, it's hitting everything. Yes, the supplier could make it better by putting it in the cloud and doing what have you. But to do that, they need to have an incentive to do it. It might be that they increase prices, but understanding what the impact is, that's really important because the suppliers don't know.
And
Yeah.
also with the risk of sticking to Fiona's brief of not going too techie, but it's what those backups look like. So in Cyberworld, we talk about an immutable backup, so a backup that can't be changed and it is protected, so it's not on the same area of where your normal same network as where your normal backups are stored, because some of the issues from learning, because part of my role is I sit on incidents within health, not necessarily social care, but some of the issues is actually making sure you've got a clean backup of data that is untouched and that you can trust. Going back to what I said at the start about being able to trust the integrity of your data, so making sure that that's clean. So cloud-based backups are helpful, but it's just making sure that they are kept separately.
So one of the things to realise is that the time between detection of a cyber incident and the time between inception of a cyber incident can be very different. So bad guys could potentially be in digital systems for weeks, months, in some cases years before anybody realises what's going on. And if they've then got access to the backups, whatever nasties that are going into the system will be going onto your backups. That's why recovery can be so challenging for organisations, because they don't know whether their organisational backups have been compromised.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, David and Catherine. Yeah, puts it into real perspective, especially with the AWS incident a few weeks back, where a lot of their services are sort of hosted cloud-based, I think, with AWS. So yeah, even on cloud, it could still have sort of impacts to that scale as well. When you think about it, I'm just conscious of time. We've only got about a couple more minutes left, and we've gone through about 3 suppliers so far using the tool. I think we were having too much fun, so we sort of lost track of time. So I'll hand it back to Glenn and Fiona if they want to sort of wrap up or take any questions or sort of outline the next steps.
Thanks, Riz. I just want to make a couple of more sort of general comments, and some of it refers back to the information you would have heard earlier in the webinar. So it's interesting. What I tend to find is with this is going through some examples really teases out some of the questions and really develops the understanding of not only what we're trying to do here, but why we're trying to do it as well. And part of that's been mentioned a couple of times is it really depends what that supplier is doing for us. That has an impact. And that comes back to some of the outputs that I think it was Holly and Liam referred to earlier in terms of that concentration risk. Only when we get more visibility of what everyone is doing within the system, who their suppliers are, can we really get a better picture? Because at the moment, it's almost invisible. We don't know who those suppliers are, who else they're supplying to. So part of this process is, as we mean to go on, we'll collect more and more data. We'll start with the most critical, but that will give us a really good understanding of actually the impact that that supplier will have across the whole of the system. And we can then look to, okay, we want better assurance from those suppliers. We want to make sure that that supplier is not playing us off against each other by saying, well, why are you asking for more information about our cybersecurity? No one else is asking for it. And actually, maybe we all are, but they're just stonewalling us a bit. I'm not saying that all suppliers do that, but there is something around divide and conquer. So if we have a consolidated view, we can be more robust around making sure that we're aware what that supply should do. And going forward, hopefully we'll have more contracts or better contracts in place, but that will obviously come around from a procurement process, improve the terms and conditions with that supplier when we re-procure or when we procure a new service. That will be, just as important. And those things are coming out this year, next year. So yeah, it all kind of meshes into actually we want to build better, be more secure, but also act as one in a more consistent and strategic way. Like I said, just looking at some of the comments here, I think that's probably important to note. Fiona, I don't think there's any more slides left from our side, is there?
No, there was just our details, but we can share those with everyone to save going back into slides. But no, I think from my perspective, we might get cut off in the next 4 minutes, so we just need to sort of wrap up. But I just really hope that everyone on the call sort of found that useful from a double side. I know it was helpful from an NHSE perspective to bottom out the tool and actually how that might work, but hopefully for those who are on the call from care providers and care associations, actually to start really thinking through the risk of the supply chain and how we can support our own organisations and our provider market to make sure that we're really considering those risks and understanding sort of where that criticality sits. So it was very, very useful from my perspective. And I think certainly some follow-ups that I know we can go through off the call in a minute.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. What I was going to say lastly from my point of view is obviously it's a bit different us doing a workshop across a number of different organisations. So many on the call at the moment. What we normally do is do this with individual organisations. So your scores represent what it means to you. What we find is that's useful for individual organisations to know, because they may not have thought about it before, who their most important suppliers are, and then use that tooling to probably go through maybe different levels of their supply chain. What we'll ask, if anyone wants us to have an individual workshop, get in touch. Fiona will either share the information or it's on one of the slides that we'll also share out after this call. But if you want to know more or you want to help us to help yourselves potentially, we're certainly more than happy to hold individual workshops where we can go for in more detail with the tooling that Riz has got. Or if you just want some more information, that will be shared with us, with you all after this call anyway, I'm sure. So yeah, that's probably the last bit from me. Also, very, very grateful for you to take the time to listen. We know that everyone's really busy all the time. 90 minutes out of your day can be, quite difficult. So again, thank you all for joining us. And we are here to help if you need any more information. Back to you, Fiona.
Sorry, lost my ability to come off mute. Thank you all, so much. Nothing else to add from me other than thanks for your engagement. Really, really helpful. I will make sure we send out slides, recording, and then all the other useful resources that Glenn has said. And hopefully we can follow up with some of you after the session. So thanks, guys. Really, really appreciate your input. I will end the call now. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.